Hello, everyone. I'm going to turn this maybe a little bit over here. When you do it, we can move it towards you. So I'm guessing in Spain, the time change has people confused, huh? Plus, you're back in a state of emergency, a state of alarm, huh? In Spain, oh my gosh. And Laura, are you still in Italy? How is it there? Is there also a state of alarm there, or also?
Hi. Yeah, also starting here, more restrictions. I tested positive myself, so in isolation.
Oh no.
Maybe
Yeah,
you could
but
do
well,
a private retreat or something, huh? Self-guided retreat.
yeah, it's long. It's feeling really long, and it's only the beginning of the second wave. So
I know. It's
yeah.
horrible.
So I was
Just
really
keep-
looking forward to today.
Oh, good. Glad to hear that. Well, I hope we can provide some levity or something to our lockdowns. And I'm glad Luis is on the call, because last week he had brought up, although I misheard him, but he had brought up paramis. And so I thought I would talk a little bit about the paramis, or the perfections, the 10 perfections in the Theravada tradition. And I think they're kind of useful because they can support us in our daily lives as well as in our practice. And then Anna Monica, who's been attending an online retreat with Bhikkhu Analayo, is going to share with us a metta meditation that he offered during the retreat. So that'll be nice. And it'll be longer than our usual, so we'll stop talking earlier than normal and let Anna Monica share that practice with us. Yeah, nothing else. I thought we would just kind of just do a pretty customary 20 minutes or so of a samatha calming practice. And then in the last 10 minutes or so, open it up to a more open awareness and allow whatever to arise, just to notice its characteristics, more of a vipassana kind of style. Or you could stay with the samatha, whatever. And one thing I do want to mention, I often forget it, so I'll mention it now while I'm remembering it. If I find this helpful, that sometimes if I'm just not able to connect with the breath or connect with the body sensations or even do awareness, I'll remind myself to be the observer. It's almost like I have like a little telescope, and or a microscope, and I'm just watching whatever arises kind of from a distance, but reminding myself to be the observer. And sometimes I find that helpful. Just be an observer, stand back. And like even with the breath, I notice I often will say, feel the breath, experience the breath. But sometimes for some people, that can be a little too close, right? And it's better to just observe the breath. Don't necessarily feel it. Just observe it, watch it. And anyway, sometimes I find that supportive, that reminder to be the observer. So if there's no, uh-oh. I'll use this. There's no questions or comments. We can get started. Make sure this is off. Yes. Okay. All right. Yeah, so let's find a comfortable posture. A posture that we can hopefully maintain for the full 30 minutes, 32 minutes often, but at least 30 minutes. So one that's comfortable, where we can relax, and at the same time not too comfortable so we don't fall asleep. For us here in California, it's only 11:30 in the morning, so we probably won't fall asleep, but maybe in Spain, where it's almost 8:30 in our bodies, right? 7:30 on the clock, but because we changed it. So a back that's erect, straight, right, is important. And feel free, if you are sleepy, to open your eyes. I do a lot of meditation with my eyes open, and it helps keep me awake. But normally we have our eyes closed so we can go inside into our inner life without the distraction that comes from seeing. So let's try to go inside and ground ourselves in our physical form, ground the attention, the awareness into the body. Maybe you might notice sensation in the body, tickling, currents of energy, points of contact. Just noticing them, feeling them, bringing about an embodied awareness. And if you're all like me, probably the mind has been thinking and wants to continue thinking, and it's not so easy to just shut it off and go to an embodied presence. So we want to be gentle with our mind. Maybe let the thoughts pass through, finish up, conclude, and gently let them go, release them. Come to the body. And so you can use the body, the posture, the sensations of the body as an anchor. And during your samatha practice, just keep coming back to the posture, to the body, feeling it, it's generally a more open awareness than, say, the breath. It serves as a very solid anchor. But if you want to have one that's a little more narrow focused, single pointedness, you could go to the breath. So let's find our breath, sensations of breathing, the body breathing. So we may notice that in the belly, the movement of the belly. Movement of the chest, or the passing of the air through the nostrils with each inhalation, each exhalation. And so if you like working with the breath, we normally will choose a spot where the breath is easy to follow, maybe even a bit pleasant to follow. And let that be our home base, our anchor. And as always, if the body or the breath are not really available or unpleasant, you can use hearing or listening as an anchor. This is a receptive listening. So you're not trying to understand what is being said or interpret the sounds. Simply notice that you're hearing. Sometimes there might even be a little buzz in the ears. Interestingly, in Sanskrit, I think the word is nada, nada sound, like a nothing sound, but it is a sound. Sometimes we can hear it, sometimes not. Some teachers even use that as an anchor. It's that little buzzing. And so we want to calm the mind, center the mind using an anchor, allowing thoughts to come and go, but not pushing them away and not judging ourselves, not criticizing ourselves, because obviously those won't calm the mind, but rather just accept what arises, watch them pass, come back to the anchor. And just experimenting, maybe feeling the breath, feeling the sensations works for you and centers the mind. Or maybe that's a little too close. And like I said, you can maybe just take a step back and observe, especially the breath. It works very well with the breath, just to observe it coming and going. And if you like to use labels, if you find that supportive, you can always label your experience, simple one-word labels. All the while being present in this present moment of here and now. if there is still a lot of sticky thought, it's difficult to let go of the thinking, you might experiment with feeling into the body to see if you can identify any sensation in the body that might be connected to the thought. Maybe some tension or nervousness or even lightness, whatever it might be. Just try to feel that sensation, experience it, kind of digest it, you might say, and see if that doesn't arrest or at least disrupt the thinking process, at least for a bit. So if you are interested, and we're a little past 20 minutes, but if you're interested in practicing a form of vipassana, you can open your awareness to allow whatever is most obvious to you, to your mind, to be your anchor until something else becomes more obvious. So you might go from the breath to sensation in the legs, for instance, to sounds, back to the breath, just resting with each one and just noticing how things come. They stay a while and they go. The impermanence, anicca, of all things. And if nothing is more obvious than your chosen anchor, the breath, or whatever, you can just stay there until something is more obvious, calls your attention. So in these final couple minutes of our formal practice, let's return to the body, unifying the mind and the body once again, create that embodied presence, that embodied awareness. So maybe you notice different sensations in the body. Maybe by now there's a body part or two that's kind of numb or tickling. We just notice that, feel that. Re-grounding our awareness into the present moment through the body. And then taking a moment to reflect, maybe feeling in and around the heart center, thanking ourselves for our practice, taking this time to connect in this way and nurture ourselves. And maybe reminding ourselves that this is not a practice just for our own selfish benefit, but for the benefit of all beings. There's probably nothing we could do that would better serve those we love and even those we don't know, but come in contact with, than to practice. And also acknowledging everybody else on this call, even those that may be following on YouTube. Thank them for their practice. And then imagining if we can extend our awareness, our consciousness, our mindfulness to include everybody on this call and maybe even beyond. Extending out with metta, loving kindness, goodwill towards all beings. And when you hear the sound of the bell, just noticing whatever arises, thoughts or feelings. Thank you all very much for practicing with us. It's always nice to practice in a group. I also like practicing alone, but seems to have kind of a different flavor, very supportive. So what I thought I would do is talk a little bit about the 10 paramis, or the 10 perfections. I admit I'm no expert on this particular list, in part because there are different versions of it that also I found kind of confusing, but I tried to look into it and see the roots of the different reason why there's different lists, and then just some of the history. So I thought I would share just a little bit about this list, or maybe what I'll do, I will share screen so you can see the list. And of course, I'm very challenged about this share screen thing, but let's see if it works. Where is my list? If I hit that, and then take this and put it over here, and then that's the Mahayana one. There we go. So I assume everybody can see a list of 10 things. Yeah. Okay, so first, a little bit of background, that the story, right? The legend is that in many lifetimes before the Buddha lived, as Gautama, the Buddha. He was, you might say, a bodhisattva. He was searching for enlightenment, and he came into a village where there was an enlightened being, already a Buddha, the Buddha meaning the awakened one, or the enlightened one. And he wanted to transmit to this Buddha that he wanted to be enlightened, and this was his intention. And he did a very noble, generous, devotional act by, there was apparently a puddle of water, and he laid in the puddle of water so that this particular Buddha could walk on his body and not get muddy water and mud on his body, on his feet. And in this moment, I guess the way the story goes, this particular Buddha transmitted to him that you will someday become a Buddha yourself. You will become fully awakened in many lifetimes, but you will eventually. And there's more details, but I won't go into them in case I get them wrong. But how the story goes. So then this prior life Buddha, I forget exactly his name, is like Sayutana or something like that. He retreats to his cave, and in the cave he ponders, what could I do to become enlightened? What could I, how could I change my actions so that I will be enlightened? And this is when he came up with these paramis, or these perfections, these 10. Now, interestingly, in the Pali canons, in the original, what we believe to be the teachings of the Buddha, he never talked about the paramis. So for some people who are into early Buddhism, they tend not to emphasize it too much because it didn't come out of the words of the Buddha. But at some point, possibly around the turn of the century, so a couple thousand years ago, or maybe a little bit earlier, but after the death of the Buddha, they included them in one of the Pali canons based on the story that I just told, that the Buddha had come up with them, maybe thousands of years before, when he was a bodhisattva. But who knows exactly what happened. So in the Theravada tradition, they have the 10 that I've listed here: generosity, morality, renunciation, wisdom, energy, patience, truthfulness, determination, loving kindness, and equanimity. Now, around the turn of the century, as some of you know, there was a division in Buddhism, and there was a newer group called the Mahayana that formed. And for most of their teachings, they have these 6. So they dropped 5 of them and they added 1, and they came up with this 6, which I just copied this one right out of Wikipedia. It was interesting. It had the Sanskrit, it has Chinese, it had Tibetan. I thought that was rather cool. So the first 4 are the same, which you find in the Theravadan ones of Dana, which, as some of you know, our meditation studio in Madrid is called Sala Dana, and this is the Dana, okay, generosity. Sila, which is morality. Santi, which is patience. Vidriya, which these are in the Sanskrit. Energy. Jhana, which is concentration or single-pointedness. And prana, which is wisdom. But further to confuse the matter, in other Mahayana texts, they have this 10. So that was one reason I often kind of shied away from it too, is like, there are all these kind of different lists. I rather prefer the Mahayana one because I love that concentration or practice is in it. But anyways, we mostly follow the Theravadan one, so we will use this list. And a couple interesting things I like about it is it ends with equanimity, as do many of the lists, right? So like the 7 factors of awakening, the 7th factor is equanimity. You know, the 4 Brahma Viharas, the 4 divine abodes, the 4th one is equanimity. And I remember on I think it was my first long retreat, I was sitting with a very excellent teacher from California by the name of Gil Fronsdale. And it was the first time that I felt, or maybe not the first time I felt, but I was feeling this very pleasant kind of sensation in my body. And I wanted to know, what is that? What is that? And so you get little interviews in these retreats. And in one of my interviews, I asked Gil Fronsdale, what is this kind of tingling sensation that I feel in my body when I meditate? And he said, well, that's probably piti. And some of you have heard me talk about piti, which has different translations, but one could be joy or ecstasy or kind of positive sort of things. And it's one of the jhanic factors. And Gil Fronsdale said to me, it sounds like it's piti, but don't get attached to it. Don't get attached to it, because even better and down the road is equanimity. So he had sort of offered and promised that equanimity is much superior to piti. Anyways, equanimity, which is, equanimidad, virtually the same, right? In Spanish, that balance and that non-reactivity, right? So that's our 10th parami, our perfection. Another thing about this that I also found a little bit confusing, but we could work with it as we want. In some traditions, these 10 paramis arise, they become part of our characteristic upon enlightenment. Upon enlightenment, upon awakening, we now then are generous, moral, and so forth. And then in others, these are what we would cultivate. It's almost like a path to awakening. Much like the Eightfold Path, this also can be a path that if we practice, cultivate these particular perfections, these paramis or paramitas in the Sanskrit, then we can achieve awakening. So notwithstanding, a pesar de, no, the fact that there's different interpretations, there's different versions of them. If we just kind of set that aside, because just to deviate 1 second, all the branches of Buddhism agree on the Four Noble Truths. All the branches of Buddhism agree on the Noble Eightfold Path. There's like no dispute around those. But for this particular one, there's different interpretations, and it's possibly because the Buddha didn't actually make this list. It came out a little bit later, not too much later after his death, but a little bit later. But anyways, one thing is for sure, I think we could all agree that these can be very helpful in our daily life, right? These are things that are useful regardless of whether we're sitting on the cushion or whether we're at work or whether we're with our family or whatever. So I'll just go with them real quick. And then I think it'll be a nice segue when we get to the 9th one, metta, loving kindness. Then Anna Monica can share Bhikkhu Analayo's practice around that. So you're going to need about 10, 12 minutes or how? Plenty? Okay. So let's see. Yeah, so I'll go for another 8 or so minutes on this. So we talked briefly about the first one, right? Generosity, giving. That is such a wonderful thing that we can do. And it doesn't mean just giving, money or whatever. Like here in this, it says giving help, giving our attention. I mean, what a wonderful, loving act, right? If we could just be present for somebody and just give them our attention, our undivided attention. So generosity can manifest in many, many ways. Morality, that one might sound a little heavy. Sila is the Pali word, but live an ethical life. Don't steal, don't don't kill, be good with our speech, so forth. So like in the Noble Eightfold Path, there's the 3 that are the morality factors, right? Renunciation. Now this one, especially in our world of, oh my gosh, material things up the wazoo, right? This one may be a little bit difficult, but I think truly less is better, right? So the more that we can let go of, probably the happier we're going to be, right? And it's also, I believe, renunciation is just simply letting go. We can renounce these thoughts. Again, going back to this retreat with Gil Fronsdale. So I had some really nice sits and some really nice insights and I thought it was going quite well. And then suddenly a thought came into my brain about something I had done 10 years earlier that I regretted, and it caught me. And it wouldn't go away. I was obsessing about it for 2, 3, 4 days. And so I go into Gil to complain or also to ask for some advice. And he said to me, he goes, Jim, this is a renunciation practice, right? And I'm like, well, yeah. And he goes, well, you need to renounce that thought. You need to just get rid of it. It was, it was the first time somebody kind of said, just renounce it, just quit it. So it can also, because it wasn't giving me, this says here, renounce worldly pleasures. It wasn't giving me any pleasure, but boy, my brain just wanted to think about it. Panya, wisdom. There's also in the Noble Eightfold Path, there's the Panya factor, the wisdom factors. And this is for many, and this also goes to Hindu beliefs too, that wisdom is the antidote to our suffering. Wisdom is the antidote to ignorance, and ignorance is the cause of our suffering. Energy, right? We need that. This is also in the 7 factors of awakening, where we want to generate enough energy to have enough energy to continue. Can't sleep through this. And at the same time, we want to be patient, right? Doesn't all come at once. We want to be truthful, which kind of may be a little bit of a duplication of the morality one, but be truthful. This is also something that Buddha talked about a lot, especially in our speech. Determined, we want to have that resolve. right? That resilience to keep on going even when times get tough. And then loving kindness, which I believe here, this one also includes compassion. It includes the mudita, the sympathetic joy that we find in the Brahma Viharas. And then finally, the equanimity, the equilibrium. Oh, yeah, it's right there. The mental equilibrium. So, in some traditions, and probably I would say maybe the Mahayana tradition, which is the Zen tradition, for instance, there's a little more emphasis on the paramis because they're often associated with the bodhisattva path. Because allegedly, the Buddha would even refer to himself in his prior lives as a bodhisattva, that a person who is able to be enlightened, to reach nirvana, but chooses not to serve others. So like Guan Yin is the archetype of the bodhisattva in the Mahayana tradition. The female form where her life, you might say, and lives, is to serve others, to help others achieve enlightenment before she does, or when she does, all simultaneously. So I think because there's more emphasis on the bodhisattva path, that of helping others, in the Mahayana tradition, you often hear about these paramis more than, say, in the Theravada tradition. However, they're so, it's like, who could argue? Maybe the only one, maybe we'd argue with a little bit might be the renunciation, right? Because we want to have a little bit of stuff. Of the paths, right? There's traditionally, I think you could say there's 3 paths to becoming a Buddha. And one of them is if we do it ourselves, this is what the Buddha did. Another, an arhat, we call it, is when you have a teacher. And then the other one is when you do it on your own, but you don't teach. You kind of keep it to yourself. But especially in the arhat version, there's a lot of renunciation. You have your bag, your bowl to beg, right? You've got your robe, and that's about it. Right? You've renounced it all. But in our world, it's pretty tough to renounce everything. To renounce all worldly pleasures, that would be kind of difficult. But besides that one, I think they're all winners, right? They're all can be pretty helpful. And yeah, maybe I think this is good. We'll transition to the metta. So that's the 9th one of this paramis. It's the first one of the 4 noble. Of the 4 divine abodes, the Brahma Viharas. And this is what we do every Sunday at the end. We do a little bit of metta, right? But Bhikkhu Analayo, this phenomenal monk, German-born, but speaks Spanish. We did a retreat with him in Spain. Speaks Italian and speaks Pali, Sanskrit, and Chinese. And so he's been able to go back to the early teachings and compare them and to see, okay, where do they agree? Where do they don't? He's a scholar, right? He's one of our foremost scholars, and he lives near Joseph Goldstein. He lives at the Bari Center of Buddhist Studies in Massachusetts, next to Insight Meditation Society, where Joseph Goldstein lives, and so forth. So phenomenal young man. And so, yeah, I'll turn this over to Anna Monica, and she will lead us.
I have until what time?
So I would say,
11 minutes?
yeah, you got at least 11, 12 minutes. Do you want a bell? Or?
No,
Okay.
no, well, first I just want to say that I've been taking this retreat just since Friday and had just a couple of opportunities to practice with this. So I think I'll just share what the process is, and then maybe next time, if it works out, guide a meditation.
You don't want to guide one today? Or?
Um, well, it might end up being partially guided. How's that?
Okay.
I don't know.
Just maybe a way to close this out with
Okay.
a little bit.
Okay. So the course is called the Brahma Viharas and Emptiness. And the way that metta meditation works into that is by shifting from doing metta, which is often how we close with this session, with using phrases, instead of doing metta to being metta. And in that practice, we use the phrases, if they're useful, only at the beginning to arouse the sensation of metta. And then the rest of the practice is abiding in the felt sense, in the boundless radiation of metta. And that same format works for the other Brahma Viharas, arousing compassion and then abiding in compassion for the rest of the meditation, or mudita, or equanimity. So I'll attempt my first time, so apologies if I do any harm in my sharing of this practice as I've just begun to learn it. I'll try to guide. So we can get comfortable, close your eyes. Bhikkhu Nalio is very clear that if at any point the mind is too restless and we cannot arouse the Brahma Vihara, then just stay with mindfulness. No reason to force. If the mind is busy, stay with mindfulness, and that's a great place to remain for our practice. But if the mind is feeling relaxed enough and we're comfortable in the body enough, then we turn to our tool, which could be, as has been in our practice, the phrases of starting with ourselves, then another being, all beings. If that's familiar, you can begin to repeat those phrases to yourself. If, on the other hand, there's an image that arises for you that pretty instantly or automatically generates a feeling of loving kindness, an animal in your life, a family member, someone that you respect greatly, then arouse that image and stay with it. Alternately for others, sometimes just the phrase metta, metta, metta is enough to generate the warmth and the care of metta. So just for a few moments, repeat the phrases, repeat the word, bring to mind the image until it feels as though the metta is self-sustaining. With kindness, with gentleness, feeling perhaps a bodily sensation develop, warmth, a smile. And then, if it's provided the metta, you can slowly let the phrases or the image fall into the background and just abide, just rest in the feeling of metta. Shifting from doing the practice of metta to being the metta, embodying metta. Letting it be a boundless radiation and not trying to increase its strength or project it, just allowing it to be at whatever level it is, subtle and quiet, or perhaps quite intense. Relaxing into metta. And from there, we're going to radiate the metta in all directions, beginning with radiating metta upward, removing curtains as though there was a curtain above our head, just letting it shine out in whatever strength that exists. Metta upward. And then metta forward, removing the curtains. Metta downward. Again, not forcing, just pulling back with as little effort, the curtains, metta downward. And lastly, pulling back the curtains behind us, letting whatever light there is radiate backward. And if the mind has wandered, as it does, bring it back into boundless radiation. Or if that's lost, begin again with the tool, the image, the phrase, the word to arouse metta again. Metta. Radiating in all directions. Our job is only to withdraw the curtains, abiding in the warmth, the glow, however strong, however subtle, of well-being, of love in all directions. And again, if we notice any negativity or any distraction of the mind, coming back to boundless radiation or starting back at the beginning. And we practice like this for as long as is useful, as long as is meaningful. Radiating boundless metta. And as we bring this practice to a close, We know that we can carry metta out in our disposition, into our daily life, radiating metta to ourselves, to others, in all our activities. You can slowly open your eyes and return to the space.
Thank you, Monica. Well, we have a couple minutes if anybody has a question or a comment. Yeah, I guess I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
So did Analio talk about what that might feel like, the metta in the body?
I asked about that, the somatic experience of metta. And honestly, I was so nervous from asking my question. I don't know that I actually heard his answer. I'm going to have to listen to the recording.
Oh.
No, he didn't give very many details that I remember about what it feels like. I think he would say it's different for everyone. Mostly talked about removing the curtains and the action of radiating without giving it a lot of descriptive qualities.
Just that imagining that it's radiating could be quite pleasant. And it reminds me of just extending our awareness, right? Extending our consciousness outward, which can be very pleasant as well.
And initially I was curious about the pairing between the Brahma Viharas and emptiness, which seem kind of very different paths. But when he described metta as boundless radiation, the radiation being the metta, and later in this course we'll shift to focusing on the boundlessness, and that's where emptiness and spaciousness come in. And so it seems like a very clear path.
Did he use the word radiation or radiance?
Yes. Radiation.
Wow. Okay. I think of radiation, like a toxic radiation. Oh, nice. Okay. Is anyone else? Let's see. Julieta says thank you. Has to go. Bye, Julieta. Have a nice state of alarm week. Yeah. Does anyone else want to say anything? Have any comment or?
I wanted to say that to thank you, Anna Monica. That was very nice. I found a nice, just kind of very, in terms of the sensation, just a kind of evenness to that felt very comforting, and I felt like I needed that. So thank you. That's great, and I look forward to hearing more about what you learn. And this may not be appropriate, but Laura, can I ask you? Did you say that you tested positive? And that you're in quarantine?
Oh, I don't think she said she tested positive, but she is in quarantine.
Okay. I thought you said you tested positive, and I said, and I was like, oh my gosh. So, but I'm glad to hear you're okay.
Thankfully, one good thing about Zoom is that we can't actually get the the COVID from each other. We could all be very sick, and it wouldn't matter. Well, good. Well, nothing new on this front. I mean, regarding Saladana, it's like ready, but I'm thinking we should wait until the state of alarm is over, even though I think legally in Madrid, we probably could have assembly of groups, but I feel a little nervous about doing anything that might contribute to somebody catching it. So I think we'll just hold tight for the moment. I was trying to read the news and I didn't read all of it, but I couldn't. I think the state of alarm is short, but then I read something that the president, Pedro Sanchez, said something is going to go on until May 9th. I'm like, oh my God.
That is what he
I don't know
said.
what is going to go on till May 9th, but that's like so long. Anyways, hopefully the state of alarm is only going to be a short period of time.
I think it's for, I think the state of alarm is for 2 weeks, but they can extend it and they can keep extending it until May 9th, I think.
Oh my gosh, really? Oh, I
If
hope that
it needs to.
that's not the case, but okay. Thank you for clarifying that.
Um,
Oh boy.
Anyway, I need to go, but I just wanted to say, Anna Monica, that was I really liked that metta practice was lovely. When I started meditating several years ago, one of the practices that we worked on a lot was metta, but we'd spend like we'd do a whole 35 minute sit on metta. So both the doing and then the experiencing it afterwards. So it was kind of a nice refresher on that to have that experience again. So thank you.
Nice, nice, Damien. Well, why don't we close up with just a little dedication of the merit, and if anybody, there's just a few of us left, but if you want to talk, or we'll maybe form 2 small groups, I'm willing to do that. But first we'll do a little dedication of the merit. Offering up, renouncing. This is right there with the third parami. So renounce the merit or the fruit of our practice, the teachings, the Dhamma, our Buddha nature, and our Sangha, our community. Sharing these, renouncing these, dedicating these to the benefit of all beings. May all beings be happy and peaceful, healthy and strong, safe and protected. May all beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering, free from war and violence, discrimination, racism, and free from coronavirus. And may all beings find their path to awakening, find their list of perfections that work for them, practice them, cultivate them. And may all beings be free from suffering, free from greed, free from hatred, free from ignorance. Yeah, thank you very much. And yeah, if you want to be in a small group, I will form those after a few minutes, or you could just unmute yourself and talk right now. I've often wanted to tell people I bought this bell in China many, many years ago. So it's my Mahayana bell. I bought it in a little town, or not so little now, but Suzhou, a little, rather big actually. It's got like 2-3 million people, but compared to some cities, it was kind of small. But many, many years ago, kind of nice. Has some engravings on it. Anyways, let's see. Bye, Lar. Take care.
Yeah.
Practice.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you, Mark.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye, Luis. Take
Adios.
care. Cuídate. And I think, Nuria, you're behind that Aquarius U light, right? Maybe you're there. Anyways, okay. Bye. Oh, hasta luego.
Oh,
Is that a word? Is that-
luego. So, ciao.